Hello everybody. Sorry I'm late to the discussion. So first off, I'm just going to look at what Joshua and Michelle have discussed, and then after looking at what they've talked about, I'll be answering this this question here, the discussion question. So the first thing I'd like to say is regarding Michelle's post. Right here, I really agree with that, especially you were talking about putting the cart before the horse, and I feel that with technology that they're definitely leaving out teachers. The focus is definitely more on the students and the teachers, and I think as Josh also pointed out, that too much emphasis with technology can have its drawbacks, especially with students being distracted. I mean, I have students in my class. I don't use it. I rarely use technology in my classroom, but just cell phone students with cell phones. I have he's like 8 or 9 years old, and he has a smartphone, and he's always playing games on it. It's very sometimes I've actually had to take it away from him and say, okay, you're going to get it at the end of class, because he's always just distracted. So yes, there's the benefits of it, but then there's also the drawbacks too, which Josh pointed out in his posting. So anyways, I'm doing kind of a mix here. As you can see, I'm recording myself as well as my screen. Here I'm going to be looking at Michelle's first, because she posted first, and then I'm going to be looking at Josh's points first. And these are just some of my notes, bullet point form. I don't like to just read off the screen too much. That's just not me. And oh yeah, Josh, I hope you enjoy Thailand. Hey, even if it's the rainy season, it should be good times. If you ever have an extra day or two, you could always fly over to Okinawa. Very close. Well, I shouldn't say very close. We're kind of still a great distance away, but close enough. So anyways, Michelle's points, 3 points that resonated with her, at least from what I got from it, took away from it, was individual skills, learner autonomy, so more active learning, and more direct feedback, quick feedback. She found to be her top 3 out of this list here. And I would agree. Oops, sorry, where was I? Get lost in that. I would agree with most of these points. I wouldn't say that they're my top 3, which I'll talk about later. But I could see how in her situation that these points are, the most, the strongest points that resonated with her. And I completely agree with Josh regarding the love-hate relationship with tech. So it can, and I guess I'm repeating myself, so it can increase motivation, but it could also be a huge distraction in the classroom. So like it says here, problems can arise. And over here, also, and actually my 3 points I actually chose for 2 different contexts, the ESL context and the EFL, because for me it was very different, choosing my top 3 in the EFL context and the ESL context, which I'll get to that later. But anyways, Josh was looking at, his 3 main points were wider exposure to language and wider authentic access. Supports different ways of learning, and how he was saying that He's an introvert, and that using technology may promote independent learning, which ties into learner autonomy, which is good for him because he may like to work alone and not in groups. So those were his main points. And I guess to go for myself, I divided into two settings: EFL setting and the ESL setting. The reason why I did this is because I feel I can't really. They're different in the different situations, and I tried to choose points that technology offers when traditional classroom doesn't. So a lot of these points, when I was looking at them, for example, this one right here, compatibility with current theories of SLA. Well, I was like, well, you could also do that in the classroom. You could also be compatible with SLA research without technology. You don't. So, but some of them, for example, wider exposure to English. I think that the internet. Oops, sorry, wrong button. The internet really does very well with that. And like Josh was saying, he actually uses it to look up for learning different languages. The World Wide Web, everything is on there. And for learners, they could be exposed to North American English pronunciation, British, Australian. There's different phrases, right? In England they say the loo, or the lift. For the loo is for the bathroom. Lift is for elevator. Crisps are chips. There's all sorts of different types of phrases out there in the English language, and the internet provides that exposure, which the classroom typically is more limited to that. You may be able to have textbooks that do encompass various types of English and their pronunciations and vocabulary, but the amount of content you can find on the internet is just vast. And also connecting regarding Skype, and connecting with people from all over the world and talking with them in real time, and you can be exposed to many I felt that was a very strong point. And again, I actually found that for both EFL and ESL, wider exposure to English language, different types of English spoken here, and then over here, same thing in the EFL setting. For example, in Japan, where I am in English foreign language setting, the traditional English that they tend to follow is American English. However, everyone knows that American English isn't the only English out there. There's many different types. So having this, they could learn about British English. They could learn about, Canadians, we're very similar to Americans. Just our spelling's different. Maybe a little bit of pronunciation depending on where we are from, like which province or which, for Americans, which state. So I felt that was still, these points here, wider exposure to English, is good for both settings, because in the ESL setting, for example, in Canada, they may not be as exposed to, depending on where they are. If they're in a large city in Canada, Canada is very multicultural, and there's a lot of different cultures, and as well as different types of English is spoken. But if they're in a smaller community, smaller city, that's less cosmopolitan, this point can definitely help with students with exposure to language. of different types of language. So I think, and in Japan, there's literally, it's 99% Japanese here. So this having a variety of English is fairly useful in my opinion. If they're going traveling overseas or doing business overseas, if I'm a Japanese businessman and I'm going to England, well, maybe the type of phrases that I need to learn will be different than if I were to go to Australia, for example. And he could gain that through Technology Mediated Language Teaching, TMLT. So the other thing, sorry, I'll try not to make this too long. Hopefully my computer doesn't freeze. It does that sometimes. Okay, the other thing I found that was very important for the EFL setting was increased opportunities for authentic interaction, which is right here. Yeah, and I actually did in our summer semester one of my research paper for our second language acquisition class. I looked at research regarding Skype with Japanese EFL students with native English speakers from Australia, and it has shown to benefit them incredibly. For one, in Japan, they just don't have the opportunities to speak English and to have authentic English interaction outside the classroom. It's very difficult. If you don't live in Tokyo or Osaka, those very very large cities that have a lot of, in Japan they say foreigners, so I could say, they're metropolitan, they're lots of different people living there. But even then, again, the that word I'm looking for. Okay, anyways, the demograph, I'm pronouncing it wrong. Get brain farts. Basically, Japan is 99% Japanese. There's very few people from different cultures, and even though there's a lot of English-speaking people, we're still in the minority. There's more Asians here. There's if we're talking about non-Japanese people, there's more Chinese and there's more Korean. The English-speaking community is very small in Japan, so I'm kind of belaboring the point, but it increases the opportunity. So in an EFL setting, they don't have the opportunities that in an ESL setting. In an ESL setting, in Canada, everyone speaks English. That's the language. Oh, I shouldn't say everyone, but that's the national language. There's English and French in Canada. So if they want to, they have incredible amount of opportunities to use English outside the classroom. Go to a supermarket. Literally, just step outside the classroom, and you're going to be exposed to the language. In the EFL setting, that's not the case. That's why I included this point here in EFL setting, but not in the ESL setting, because I feel that increased opportunities for authentic interaction, well, I feel like in an ESL setting, they already have that. So why that wasn't a strong point for me in the ESL. ESL setting. So the other thing, and no one mentioned this actually, I feel like technology enables flexible learning, and we're actually this is a benefit that we're using. I'm a Canadian living in Japan, doing my master's at the University of Calgary. So this is a huge point for me, and this is actually just in general. This doesn't even. I'm not learning. I'm not an ESL student. I'm not an EFL student. But in general, technology allows this ability of flexibility. So I put that point on both settings because I feel that in a traditional classroom, this is just not. It doesn't offer this amount of flexibility. I cannot be doing my master's. I cannot be without technology today. If I were to go back, I'm guessing technology wasn't good enough. Yeah, 50 years ago, I would have to move back to Canada to do my master's. I would have to stop my work in Japan, and I would have to move back. And my case, my situation, and I think also Joshua, you're living overseas as well. That presents a perfect example of flexible learning, and I think that's a huge part of using TMLT in education. That's a huge advantage it has in all domains, I think. And so I gave that both points in EFL and in ESL. So now for ESL, I already mentioned this, flexible learning, and I already mentioned wider exposure to different types of languages spoken, which I felt also useful in the ESL setting. The other thing I agreed with, and this was mentioned by Michelle, is offers opportunities for more and alternative types of feedback, which is right over here. Yep. So right here, again, this one thing we have currently now is called Google Docs. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Google Docs, and that's great for peer-to-peer feedback. If you assign, you could do this in various different ways. You could assign a group project, and they all work on it together on one document, or you could have them correct each other's papers, which you can do traditionally in the classroom as well, but you can also do it online. It also provides, I feel that here, it also says other things such as immediate or delayed feedback for learners. So sometimes in a classroom setting, teachers don't have the resources, i.e. time. Sometimes we're very busy to be able to give the amount of feedback that we want to. Give the amount of scaffolding that we want to, tailored individually to each student. So the ability to provide immediate feedback, I think is very, very useful for teachers and for learners. And again, using email. Email is a technology that I can use. I use regarding my business English classes. For email, I send grammar points, grammar handouts, as well as grammar quizzes. So in my classroom, when we're one-on-one in the class, I tend to focus on speaking and listening, conversation, oral communication. And then when it comes to, I feel that grammar is an individual, can be done individually at home. I use that as a tool. I will send, I will use email, and I always tell my students, if you have any questions, please email me. If we didn't have time in the class, please email me, and I could get back to you as soon as possible. Or, for emailing online quizzes, again, they'll take the quiz, and then they could print it off, and we can look at it in class if they have any questions regarding the test. And the test, they self-score, they automatically score, and they automatically provide the answers for the students. And so if the students, so this again saves me time. It saves me time from marking the quizzes, and students can self-check. So this kind of also ties into independent learning, learner autonomy, which I do agree with, which Michelle pointed out as well. So some things that I guess we kind of crossed over on in my agreement with Josh's and Michelle's post is that more direct feedback. I do agree with Michelle on that. as one of my top 3 in the ESL setting, as well as indirectly, through this point, I believe it does support learner autonomy. Okay, so but I didn't put that as my top 3, but indirectly it does. It does do this, more active learning. And I do agree regarding some of the drawbacks, which wasn't part of this week's question, but can be stressful, especially for people who aren't technology literate. And it can also be distracting. So, now for Josh's points, I did agree with wider authentic access and wider exposure to language for my top 3. And it depends on my setting, but you will find that I did agree. Now, that's just for top 3. Choose the top 3. It says right here, choose 3 benefits from the following that you think are the strongest reasons. So that's just for the strongest reasons. As for everyone's points, I actually agree with them all. But when it comes to top 3, I would say that we had crossover on, what was it? Wider exposure to English, increase opportunities. I believe, or that maybe that was a different. Yep. No, that's, yeah, Josh mentioned that as well. And again, here, offers opportunities to more. Michelle also mentioned that in her top 3. And so yeah, so the only one I would see that in my top 3 in the 2 different settings that no one mentioned was flexible learning, enables flexible learning. And the reason why I chose that is because traditional classroom settings do not offer the same amount of flexible learning that technology does. Okay, and sorry for the long video. This one was very long, 22 minutes. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you guys. Bye-bye.